Hello, 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 hello. Today I'm talking with Jon Kern. We talked about how he's always a student, simulations for engineers, and how he was accidentally introduced to software.
I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello, hello everyone, and hello with me I have John. I guess that's how I should pronounce your name.
Yep. Yeah, my
Right.
full name is Jonathan, but everybody shortens it to John. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we learned already something. And John or Jonathan, I'm here in Belgium, and let's show me with Google Maps where I am in Ghent in Europe, and you're in Quakertown. I think that's
Yeah,
Philadelphia. Is that
just
correct?
north of Philly. Yep, north of that, our Super Bowl champion Philadelphia, we might say, right now.
Mm-hmm. That's what
Yes.
I thought to bring
Yep.
in,
Yep.
and let's bring us both back on screen, full screen. For me, it's a little bit after 8 o'clock in the evening. What's the time on your side?
A little bit after 2 o'clock. Yep.
After 2 o'clock. So just I want to ask it always because with people international, it's not always clear what time zones are for everyone, and it's always a little bit nicer to know a little bit. Now,
Yeah.
John, before we jump into the questions, could you introduce yourself? What do you want people to know about you for the few people that don't know you yet?
Oh well, that's I think probably a lot of people don't know me. Um, well, I started off as a aeronautical engineer, so most people that were software engineers would probably laugh at the, I think, two software courses I had in college. One started on cards, and then the second one we did have screens. So
Wow.
speaking of kids not knowing what screensavers are, but yeah, so as an aeronautical engineer, I was testing cruise missile jet engines and whatnot in altitude chambers, and you can imagine there's monitoring systems and screens that have data and numbers and stuff like that. So I got introduced accidentally to software when the test cell engineer made some. I said, hey, can we add such and such information? And then when I saw what he was doing and asked what it was, he kind of said software. So I was like, well, that's cool. So you can actually do this kind of thing and something changes, right? So that was just a little bit of where I started getting my teeth wet, and then I began morphing into engine decks or simulations for engines, and then switched jobs into Defense Department contractor and doing flight simulation. And again, so it's a nice, beautiful segue from the aeronautical equations to actual software and things like that. Running um, essentially F-14 simulations on a centrifuge that pulled the actual G forces. It was a 50-foot arm, huge national
Wow.
asset here in Pennsylvania, bolted to the bedrock of the earth, a 4,000 horsepower electric motor. Like to see if it looks like a bridge, like a giant truss, right? You can imagine a 50-foot bridge across a river and see that thing spin up. So I put plenty of F-14 pilots through flat spin. I don't want to say training because you don't want to train a pilot, but that was what was in Top Gun, right? The goose got killed. Nobody actually, to my knowledge at the time, no one had died from flat spins, but we had lost 30 F-14. So fascinating journey from kind of hardware to software, and then they were going to be closing the basin at the same time. I decided to start trying to find and moonlighting and doing more software on the side, and then was able to create a my own company in 1995. So I didn't have to move because they closed the base. So yeah, I kind of have a whole, you might say, a whole career before kind of the software, and then ended up uh, quitting my own company and helping found TogetherSoft, which was a UML modeling tool. And
Mm.
during that time, made a trip to the mountains, so to speak. But in those formative years of doing Defense Department work for about 10 years, that's what caused me to create a lightweight methodology. Because as a taxpayer, there was a lot of waste, let's just say, built into the system. So I created something that I thought was more pragmatic and less wasteful. So, I will credit working in those environments with mill standard software specs to helping me create a lightweight methodology. Plus, my mentor back then was Peter Code, who was the object-oriented guy. We founded, I worked with him from my company to his company, and then we got a chance to strike out and create TogetherSoft as a separate company. So, yeah.
And didn't you write a book together with him, or at least work together on a book?
Yeah. There's a few that I cooperated on, and one he was actually able to put my name on, the Java design. And then
that's the book, if I'm correct.
Yeah. And then there's another cool one that I did. It's actually just holding up my laptop. and another one. There's already 3 authors, so it's like Peter said, I can't add you here, but basically all the diagrams and everything, that's all me. And I did put my lightweight methodology. Funny enough, my brother was a huge Lotus Notes guy, so he wrote this big ass book, and I don't know, Lotus Notes 5 or something, and I put a chapter in there about kind of my early thoughts on how to run, lightweight agile type, what we would call agile today, processes. But yeah, I've toyed with the idea of writing. I mean, I have a ton on the. I keep dragging stuff from wiki to wiki, and places that I work, and then I share it with clients that I work with. I'll often dump it on their wiki, and I think I might make a rag out of it, some AI thing, or dump it into there, like, hey, what would Jon Kern say? Because it's kind of like a little bit of my philosophies over the years that I use for helping teams, find, as my colleague John Turley would say, find ways to do more joyous and meaningful work.
Like you say, you keep writing the book and rewriting the book, because I guess with every new client you learn new stuff, and you throw away some old stuff. And,
right. Yeah. And on the side, for coming up on 20 years, I still actively write code. It's a Rails app now. It started as a J2EE app for firefighters. So that's kind of my buddy and I, we often say it's our do good work. So I do that as well. And
wow.
And at least there I can do BDD and TDD and practice what I preach, so to speak, and keeps me somewhat honest. But yeah,
well, so it reminds me of that really first sentence of the manifesto. We are uncovering better ways of developing by doing it and helping others doing it. So,
thank you. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, but for me, it's the first sentence that most people don't even remember when they talk about the first sentence. They immediately talk about individuals and interactions. Like, no, there's actually 2 sentences before that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a slide that when I talk about it at various conferences or wherever, I point that out, that the kind of I don't know, I made it up, but the preamble and even whatever you call the thing about this over that, the postamble, I don't know what you would call it. Those 2 things are packed with humility. In terms of, I often use a phrase. I know Ari Van Bennekom liked it. I often said, I felt like we left our egos at the door. I mean, I didn't have an ego, but everyone else, they left their egos at the door. But yeah, you're right. That, I point out that is active voice. It's not past tense. It's not like we came down from the mountain, although we were up at the top of a mountain. But yeah, you're right to point that out, because it's one of my friends. I was talking a little bit about things like this, and he goes, "Yeah, you can talk about the work, or and if we do this, we do that, all talk, or we can work about the work, kind of the same thing. It's by doing it. It's not like, and that's why coaches have their place, but I like to think about what I do is mentoring is, yeah, sometimes I might do a BDD example. We might do some code retreat type katas, or something in a simpler space. But we quickly have to get into your world, because that's what people are facing, their world. And by doing it is how we learn. And I often say you have to experience agile. You can read about it in a book, but you can't master it, or you can't. There's no way to master it. I'm always a student as far as I'm concerned. Never a
I,
master,
I
like
I
yoga.
like that phrase as well. You're never a master.
Always a
It's
student. Yeah.
um, yeah. I think there is a lot of talk always in the in the community about agile is a mindset and blah blah. But then I think most people forget how they learned agile. Is that whatever they did, they learned it much more by doing than by learning it from a course. The most people who started with it 20 years ago, and even the
Yeah.
first followers, we learned it by doing things.
Right.
And okay, that mindset is important, but we learned that mindset by doing things, not by following a 2-day course. Or
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. There's a lot of people want the easy route, and I say agile is the hardest route. It's the most difficult. It's very simple. Oh, there's four values, and very simple, but super hard to do. I make mistakes all the time, and oftentimes it's way easier helping a team in spotting things than sometimes I wish, oh, where's the John on my shoulder that is, because sometimes I commit, I commit crimes against agile, if that's such a thing. I just made that up, because it's not easy. Yeah, it takes a lot of vigilance, constant partial attention, even. Yeah.
yeah. And I so much love the fact that indeed when you're helping another person, another team, whatever, you're an observer, and then you're in that observer mind. But once you're busy, you're not so much in the observer mind. And okay, we can take from time to time a little break and try to be in that observer mind. But while we're doing it, it's really hard
Yeah.
to
Yep.
have that other way of
Yeah.
thinking.
Sometimes I'm in the, wow, how did I write this much code? Oh, yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, what happened? It's like, why didn't I stop myself? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but that's well, yeah. That I really like that you emphasized it, because a lot of people then think, oh, but these people who were there up in the mountain, they knew everything, and well, yeah, you're still learning every day. I remember that I think it was Ken Beck who said when he joined Facebook that he had to rethink almost everything he thought about extreme programming, because they were doing it at a different way of working.
interesting. Yeah,
So yeah, there was a lot there to learn and to relearn, I would say.
yeah.
So we jumped right into that even before one first question. I love these kind of conversations. So thank you already for pointing that out. Let's move to that very first question. What is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking with a young lady this morning in Sweden, and we've been working together on some reimagining agile stuff, and I even brought up something from my far past. So it's funny, because I think that it definitely starts with my parents. I say my dad was the smartest. He was like a Renaissance man. Crazy, crazy, brilliant. High school dropout. Ran away from home 3 times to try to get into World War II. That kind of thing. Amazing. Um, but then even beyond that, along the way, there's just a wonderful cast of, I don't know, maybe I call them accidental mentors or opportunities to learn and grow. So just a couple of really early ones were, um, certainly there was Mr. Griffith across the fence, and he owned a little small orchard type thing, and wonderful, I think, Socratic type person that would have this young, oh, sixth to eighth grade, whatever that is, but young, 12 to, I mean, yeah, I don't know. You can figure it out, 12 to 13 or 14, something like that. And he would often challenge me and ask questions. And, so like cool stuff. And he was a history teacher, substitute. He was old at that time. Taught me lots of cool things I still do today, like clean my hands off in the grass. Or I do things a lot barefoot like he did. He would garden, and you can clean your feet off in the grass. So it sounds dopey, but I still do it. And every time I do it, which is all the time when I'm outside mowing the lawn or doing something, you get hands dirty, you just clean them on the grass. I thank Mr. Griffith. It's funny. He's some guy that just almost like a grandfather like figure. And then washing dishes. This is what I was talking with Carolina. Is I learned some amazing things, including lean. There was one funny point where I was washing dishes. I'm probably 15 and got a stack of clean dishes, and the primary cook they were all Vietnam War vets. They taught me some probably bad things. But Cosmic Muffin yells at me. He goes, "Kern, what?" And he's like looking at his he has no dishes in which to plate the food in which to do the orders. So he looks down at the empty thing and he's like, "What are you doing, building sandcastles over there?" Because I had these stacks of beautifully clean plates, right? What a beautiful lean analogy. Like, dude, you're like stacking up work. Like, come on, all kinds of work. Like, move it along. So it was pretty funny looking back on it. That so anyway, I have so many fun things that I learned, including at the next job because I got fired from that one. I learned more about how to begin some of my sort of mental, the ability to not let negative things affect me deeply, and ways to kind of steel myself. Because I worked with, it's not uncommon to have tyrannical executive chefs. People see it on TV these days, but yeah, it's their kingdom, right? It's their, and this, I ended up becoming really good friends with this guy, but nonetheless, there was a lot of initial, you would say, psychologically unsafe today. Yet, yeah, so funny things like that I look back on that I should probably share, like with my kids. Sort of amazing ways it led me to some motivational speaking and self-help tapes and things like that in my late teens and early 20s, probably going to college and stuff, driving back and forth and listening to not only awesome rock and roll but self-help tapes. So I find that was very foundational to build kind of part of who I am now.
I really like these examples because, from what I understand, these are different kind of people that had a lot of influence on you and combined, created you in a way. Of
Yeah.
course, with a lot of other things that you learned along the way. Especially as a young child, as a teenager, learning about lean, about okay, it doesn't make any sense that you do
Right.
everything in these plates. No, it has to be usable for the
Right.
next person in line.
Yeah.
It's very logical, but I can imagine that you, before he shouted at you, you were thinking you were doing a really good job because
Exactly. Yes. Right. Yeah. And it's so true today. Yeah. Because I often say the biggest thing that most folks are doing that I would suggest doing less of is they I see too many teams doing far too much work to too great of a depth, right? So you're nailing it. What I was doing was, yeah, I'm really proud. Pride's not necessarily a good thing to have, but most people would understand that. Proud of, yeah, I'm doing this great job here, and look at how well I'm doing. No, you're actually not. It would be better if you did a little slightly less and moved it along. And so a lot of folks, giant.
yeah, but then I can't focus. I'm less effective, less
Right.
efficient, and
I do
yeah.
UX 8 hours a day. So what are you going to get? 8 hours worth of UX, even if I only needed an hour. right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we're in a yeah, we can talk more about that, but it's sort of like the curse of the expert, and thinking you're doing the right thing, and it is good, but not realizing what, it needs to go downstream. So yeah, it was a really early lesson in that. Cool. And I will say another lesson might be a bad one, but it was kind of good. And I did some crazy thing, and it was hilarious at the time. But yeah, when you're taking a garbage out and you're a dishwasher, and at the end of the day, you take the garbage out. We had a golf cart, and we're taking it because this is now I was working in a country club. Hey, let's go. It's a nice, cool moonlit night. Let's go for a little joyride. Me and the other dishwashers, and ended up wrecking the golf cart. You know,
Whoa.
and probably like it's pretty funny. I don't want to go into all the details. I didn't get fired,
Hmm.
so that was a different shift. That was Ron, Big Ron, Big Ron. Um, and I equate that to because I was a damn good employee, so to speak. Although I was a really good employee at the other job and I got fired, but that's a different story. I love having gotten fired at a young age. That's an important lesson to have gotten out of the way. That you can be really good and still get fired, and it's just is. It doesn't say who you are or anything like that. So, but anyway, I also learned to do the really good job. Try to take take it as if it's your company, so to speak, and do your best. It's protected me over the decades of not getting whacked because folks know I'm trying hard and doing things. Sometimes you make mistakes. So that was another early lesson of, maybe if as it was a crappy employee, they might have fired me. They had every reason because, yeah, it's a pretty funny story.
That reminds me of, I think is a story I heard of I think IBM, where there was someone who made a huge mistake that cost, I don't know, a couple of $1 million, and then he was called into the office of the founder Watson, I think,
Yeah.
of
What's
one
up?
of the and
Hmm.
he was thinking like, okay, I will be fired, and Watson said, no, 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 I just invested 4 million into you. I'm not going to fire you because the next person might do the exact same mistake, and I hope you won't. Well, I trust you that you
Right.
won't make that mistake anymore.
Yeah.
And
That's
like yeah, it's really powerful, but of course I can imagine that most owners won't be that smart, but
right.
won't realize it.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a story, and I don't know how true it is, but it's a story that I heard multiple times already. It gets around, and people learn about that. I don't know what the lesson was that he learned, but yeah, I guess the other employees at IBM all learned. Okay, that's this mistake. We shouldn't make that.
Right.
Um, and at the same time, if like you say, if you're a good employee, okay, money is gone, it's already gone, it doesn't matter. Let's prevent that it's happening again.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a new employee might make the same mistake again.
Right.
So I really like these stories. Thank you for sharing. Let's move to that next one. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what could have become of you?
Yeah, that's another good one. So all through, yeah, definitely started in sixth through eighth grade, and then through high school. Big into, I like to say, maybe because I was born near a strategic bomber Air Force base. Maybe when I was in the womb, somehow the jets got into me. So I was really big into fighter planes and learning all about, especially World War II, German and American and British fighters, um, and I applied in high school. I applied to go to the Air Force Academy, and my buddy applied to go to the Navy Academy. If I had to do it over again, I would have done the Navy. But nonetheless, I wanted to fly fighter planes. But as you can see, I'm wearing glasses, and especially my left eye is way too. It was. They basically said uh, some kind of provisional acceptance, but non-flying, which I knew. Like 80% is supposed to be flying, and so I'm thinking, there's probably not a chance that I'll get one of those narrow slots, and my grades aren't. I was a reasonably good student, but not some insane, top of the class type. So, so that didn't happen. And I'd say I had to quickly decide, oh, I wonder what I want to do. Oh, there's this thing called aeronautical engineering. I'll go with, so a little, very late change there about what I wanted to do. So I think had I gone to the Air Force, I probably would have been bitterly disappointed, just because there's going to be times when you're just told by people that might have rank, but you might not have their respect to do stupid things. So I have a feeling I might not have lasted too long. I don't do well with authority, put it that way. A I'm
Which
a
in the army might not been always.
correct, exactly. I might not that kind of yeah. I have a feeling I would have learned some hard lessons and
Mm,
been disappointed. Uh,
yeah, like
so I'm not a fighter pilot. I only dreamed about it. Worked on flight simulations. Had some fun stuff. Like so I
and in a way, you might have had more impact because you improved all these things and you learned with your software. Pilots might learn to fly better without damaging
yeah.
aircrafts and anything like that. So you might have had a bigger impact in that sense.
Yeah. Matter of fact, there's this funny thing. I did this work to build a kind of a real time system on a PC to help do some research in head up display symbology. Like quickly identify friend or foe and things like that. So, um, Lieutenant Commander John Deaton asked me to do it. He was the PhD doing the research, and it was pretty cool. Another great lesson. I found, I had written some assembly code to overclock the what is it, the something 2020 timer chip. I forget what it's called. Um, to overclock it because normally it was 53 milliseconds was as good as you could get, on a PC back then, like a 286. And so I found this assembly code and some like computer magazine, wrote it so I could get millisecond resolution. And then a little bit later, I found I could buy for $50 Ryle. I always remember this, like Ryle Designs timer. So this guy's dedicated to this thing about making it real time. So I spent $50, threw away my code, dropped in somebody whose sole job is to be awesome with this, right? Versus for me, that was just a necessary evil. So that's another great lesson in life of, you know, what's core versus context to what you're doing.
Mm.
To me, being, if I could drop in somebody else's code. And what was cool was as it went from the 286, 3, 486, 586, this guy kept updating his software. I then used the same platform and started doing real time control of missiles. With the same, being able to run within a certain time clock and that kind of thing. So there's another sort of accidental lesson about, don't get too attached to your own code. How quickly I threw it away. Because, whew,
Oh,
thank goodness somebody else can write this code, because I think I also trashed my system at one point because I screwed something up in assembly. You're like, oops, I just deleted some directory because it was a piece of crap Windows, right? So it was, hey, yeah, sure. I don't care what the memory address is. I'll happily, I think I lost some directory tree somewhere. So, yeah,
but
more.
I really like that you stressed it out, the fact that you don't always have to write it yourself, because there's a lot of companies where I help out where you say really like the not invented here syndrome. They want to write their own languages, they want to write their own, I don't know, testing framework or whatever. And it might have been there might have been a moment 10 years ago when that was needed because it wasn't on the market, but now there's a lot more on the market, and then like you say, you wrote it yourself, then you find this other person that is actually making his job to do
Right.
this, and then you can forget about it. Oh, you upgrade your computer, you don't worry, because he has your back basically.
Correct.
um,
Yeah.
and you can focus on what's your core business.
Right. Yeah. Because
um,
yeah, and the same thing. Like I love the Rails ecosystem. Corey Haynes introduced it to me in I think 2009. He was on a funny tour driving around. He stayed at my house for a few
Oh,
days.
the when he did the tour for the coach retreats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So um, that's another ecosystem where there's so many libraries that people donate, like Devise for the whole, the user things, forgot password. That whole world is plug it. You can plug it in. You don't have to write it. Admittedly, some things, that means it might have more than you need and whatnot. I'm not saying it's a one size fits all way to think, but it's for me. I'm trying to write a firefighter app, not trying to write. How do I read PDFs or create PDFs, or I don't need to do all that crap if I can plug it in. So I think that's the engineer in me. I often say, engineers put man on the moon, so to speak, not scientists, because somebody has to do the basic research. I'm glad people create Ruby. I'm glad people care about faster doubly linked lists, but I could care less. I just want to use it and get something done for real. So that's kind of been probably an engineering type attitude of I got to make it work. I got to use what I have. But anyway, this little head up display thing, to your point, um, yeah, it's somewhat related to, of course, pilots. And a lot of the work I did was I was actually in Navy TAC Air. A lot of the work I did, as I was saying, F-14 simulations and pilots and things like that. But what's funny is we actually got an award for this head up display work.
Wow.
And that's a bit of a funny story in that sitting at my desk, I get this call. Hey, this is from from the Society of Experimental Test Pilots, and you've been you won this Harry S. Salmon Award for da 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 da. I'm like, all right, is this like a joke? Like, who are you? Oh, and he kept going. Oh, and then we're gonna have this big affair out at the like where the Oscars are and Burbank and the whatever that hotel is, and yeah, it's black ties. You got to wear a tie, and he goes on and on before he takes a breath. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Because you
Like,
had no idea that they existed, these kind
no,
of
yeah, I
awards.
had no idea it existed. And he's talking about some paper, like I have no idea what, uh, and I, it was like a candid camera moment. And it turned out somebody lifted the IEEE publication that we had done and put it in the Society of Experimental Test Pilot. I don't know if they do like quarterly magazines. So that's why like nothing made sense. And it was finally like, oh, okay, so you really are talking about something we did. So that was cool. Yeah, but it was really funny because it felt like, nah, you're pulling my leg, you're joking, this isn't real. He goes, oh no, it really is. So my buddy and I didn't end up going out there. It was hysterical. Fun night, meeting cosmonauts. There's one like drunk Russian cosmonaut who was like the stereotype, really hilarious guy. Um, and luckily we got to go on stage first, didn't have to say anything because I'm sitting there with people that are in charge of companies that making rocket engines, and Commander Voss is telling about the cruise missile. I wasn't on that program, but another guy was the time when the space shuttle pilot rescued the satellite or something like that to fix it.
Wow.
And it was you know only had enough energy to do two attempts, and then he was so efficient he could do a third. So all these famous people, and then there's us who did this stupid paper. So it was really funny. Funny little, but yeah, to your point,
But it's nice that these people then recognize it shouldn't always be out in space and whatever. There's like, hey, this is actually something that helps a lot of people, and
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever
yeah, it was
they
good.
want.
Yeah, it was fun. And yeah, I think your comment about that, though my trajectory, I didn't become an Air Force, fighter pilot. You're right. That would be fairly narrow. You know, yeah, I probably would have gone out and become an airline pilot or something. Who knows? But yeah, you're right. That's an interesting observation that the trajectory of my life was different, and it probably impacted more people, so to speak, in some sense. But yeah,
Hmm. That's something we can't foresee when we start, of course.
right.
I want to move to that next question. What do you consider your biggest challenge at this moment? At least the biggest challenge you want to share openly online, and why is it a good thing for you?
Yeah. This was one question I actually shared with my buddy John Turley because I was like, "You probably know me better than I know me." Because I think you're looking for something deeper than, well, the Matterhorn. No, I think you're looking for personal
It,
sort of a.
I on purposely with all the questions don't give too much context because that I've learned that that gives so much more diversity in what direction that people go. So indeed, it might be something very small that you just had today for whatever reason, but it might be something, and I leave it really up what you want to do.
Yeah, I think one of the things that he helped point out was I have both a something that could be a blessing and maybe not quite a curse, but um, one of for example during I am on a school board. This is my third term, like so I don't know 10 years already. Um, During COVID, you might imagine it wasn't the most pleasant place to be on a school board, and then so after that turbulent time. Um, the next round of school board happened, and I was essentially forced to be the school board president. I didn't run for it, I didn't want it, I didn't ask for it, but um, the they just kind of said, no, we need your steady hand, your personality. We need you to help us after this turbulent time. When there was a lot of angst, a lot of um, just super high stress. And so one of my goals was to, build a mantra, and we're still using it today. But slow down to go, to go fast. Basically, kind of, we have a direction of travel, and the phrase I like to use is, I will inexorably just keep moving in a direction, which is good in some sense. And then, as things happen, I remember the board secretary would often come and I'd have to sign a bunch of stuff after the meetings. And so in the old days, people would just go, right out. There's just so much stress. As soon as the meeting was over, the board members would just leave. And then now you can start seeing the, people staying and people talking and even, former, maybe pull, I don't want to say enemies, that's too strong. Anyway, you could see that the tenor of the meetings begin to change month after month. It just until things just got better. And he points out that I can use that skill frequently to just kind of make it a point to just keep moving regardless of the resistance. And he said sometimes I can add blinders, and maybe there's some things I don't see happening
Mm.
because of that.
Because you keep moving.
Yeah, right.
And from what I'm hearing is that you might then leave people behind because you're moving on and then you don't realize that people are not following. Is that what you're
or
saying?
or I think what he was saying is I might miss some signs. There might be some things that because I've sort of taken a stand, there's a mild risk that if that being focused on a direction, I could miss some things. um, but anyway, that that's something that
Yeah.
that he thought of as one of my it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's a strength, and sometimes I might miss some things. Yeah.
I really like this as an example because again, when we talk about challenges, um, a lot of people see sometimes that yeah, that the good things in people don't always see that there is also a dark side in it, the challenge that there's always two sides to a coin, or always is maybe exaggerated, but in many cases there is good parts and there is bad parts, and indeed, and so,
Yeah.
could you, can you, I don't know if it's not too much into detail, would you want to share an example on where that gave a problem at some point, or is that too
Um,
much to ask?
yeah, I don't know if he had one. I think he was just recognized because sometimes in the work that we've done together with like software teams, um, the analogy might be, I you know this might be the best that I can think of is, so I'll have a vision as to where we're headed, and the kind of changes we need to make, and trying to I often call it like entrained flow, which is a aerodynamic or hydrodynamic term. Like when you're driving behind a big truck, or lorry, and if you get really, the wake behind it, that's entrained flow. You see especially when it's wet, you can see you know, if you're in a Volkswagen bus, you can get stuck behind a big truck. It'll just suck you along. That's entrained flow.
Right.
So the idea is that keep moving and train flow, get people there. And to your point about sometimes you can lose people. After the fact, I realized, after talking to one of my buddies in a company that I had helped kind of move to the next level, I thought it was going super slow. Like, oh man, wow, this is taking really long. And then over some beers, he goes, "Oh no, it was like crazy fast. How quickly we were changing." So, there's an example of um, me not perceiving enough of the signals in the system, because this was after the fact. So I'm not going to say I knew it at the time. So I think maybe that's what John means, is I might just
Hmm.
be, even though I think it's going slow, I think it's going there, it's still, I don't know that I left people behind, but they felt like they were probably running and trying to catch up, and so many things changing, and so that I think that's something that's hard, is
Hmm.
um, gauging, the room, so to speak.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I also have similar kind of feeling. For example, when I leave a client, that I might be disappointed that we only got to a certain stage. And actually, I've learned myself to also look back at when I started. Like, would I even have imagined that we got this far? And in many cases, I never would have imagined that. But of course, the moment that I'm leaving, I'm thinking about the current situation and all the visions that or my colleagues have about where we can go.
Yeah,
And in the beginning, I used to be very disappointed all the time until I realized, no, 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 that's just because I'm at this current stage and I want to get further.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, thank you for sharing this. It's again very interesting to learn about these things, and I think here with you and with a lot of people when I talk, I notice a lot of passion. Like you say, you have that drive. You want to go faster. Do you know what drives you or where that passion is coming from? Do you have any idea?
yeah. That is a really good question, because I have an odd blend of, I would say, and on the one hand, about certain things I'm pretty competitive. Luckily, my wife's not home, because she might have stuck her head in and said, "You think?" Um, but so it's um, certainly when I'm doing product development, the things that drive me, is putting, classic, putting smiles on the clients' faces. But I think now, um, outside of that, because that's almost a given. What really I like to try to do, and I think keeps me motivated, is helping people see things differently. Um, it's because uh, it's can be super, not only helpful, it's super interesting, and I kind of use the school board as a bit of a practice. Like, it's a fun um, arena in which to practice this, because um, and some things that come up to the board for vote or discussion, and many times my goal is to try to do the best thing for the community. And I often don't have a horse in the race, so to speak. I try not to be political about it, or I think it's just, what should we be doing for our stakeholders? And I know there have been, quite a few topics that were contentious, and I know for sure some folks were, let's say, a hard no on something. And I would use various techniques to bring different perspectives and to ask questions, and would more likely than not help those folks completely change their mind, so to speak, because of bringing to bear. I don't want to say Socratic methods, but the kind of thing is just to present things in different light and show different perspectives, because that's often what's missing in so much of what we do is there are more than one perspective, and there are different ways that people make their meaning, that John Turley has been instrumental in teaching me about. so that's kind of, whether it's the development teams, helping them see different ways, helping them understand maybe the client's perspective in a different way, and vice versa, right? It's not all one way. It's sometimes I feel like a therapist in between, teams, so to speak. But a lot of it is about perspective and helping people see things differently. So that's probably what drives me the most, because that allows results to happen, I would say.
Right. Yeah. But I recognize that, and I think, well, some of the other answers that I got are very similar indeed. That, yeah, the results parts, that's definitely something that I've recognized and I heard before. And talking about results, I want to go to that next question. What do you consider your biggest achievement? And what I've learned on this show is that basically this is your moment to brag and to be really proud. Is that something easy for you, John, to brag?
No, although, yeah, I try not to. I try to be humble. Um, yeah, so I tried, not to be boastful or prideful. But I have done some things that were hard, and
Mm-hmm.
climbing the Matterhorn. That's a cool one, because I first saw it in 19. I'm going to date myself, in 1977. Um, it's on the Toblerone bar for,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or the Toblerone bar, depending on how you want to pronounce it. It's
Is it
on the
still? I thought they removed it, but I'm not
what?
sure.
It better
Yeah.
not. No, I'm pretty sure.
I,
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's still there. It has
I
to.
can check and I'll add it in the show
Yeah.
notes. But yeah, it's indeed used to. I'm pretty sure it used to be
Yeah, I
there.
mean, it's a super famous crag because it stands by itself. It looks like none other. So I said, yeah, I want to climb that. And then many years later, um, I did. So, like the image of my classic screenshot or my classic avatar is from. It's kind of funny. Took like a gazillion shots of setting the camera up, timing it, and then trying to stand in the same position and seeing if I got, because I was trying to get the reflection of the Matterhorn in my glacier glasses. So it's but that's the little hidden picture in my headshot is the Matterhorn. My goal, and I use that when I talk about one of the most important things, whether you're building a new product, a major epic, or even a feature, is what is the vision? What's the flag in the distance? What's the goal? What are we expecting? What's our outcomes? So I still use one of my own photos as kind of the.
I think that's the picture you're
There
talking
you
about.
go. Yep, that's the mountain in my glasses, and yeah, it probably took like 100 shots. Because you can imagine, I set it up on a rock, and then I would run 6 feet away and stand there and
Oh
see,
yeah,
and then
this was before. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't, it would have been a lot easier if somebody was there taking the picture for me, but yeah, it was just me on the trail. But anyway, uh, and then I think beyond that, the biggest achievement is having three wonderful kids. Mostly my wife, I will say. I was doing a lot of traveling at the time. I'll give my wonderful wife the bulk of the credit, but that's the real job, so to speak. That's that's a wonderful, privilege to have kids that they're grown up and um, they're not, they're good. They've got twin.
Someone just last week, I think I had a recording with someone who said they're beyond the age that I can still damage them, something like that. And I like that very much. It's like, yeah, once they're grown up, it's like, okay, you've done the majority of the work. They're
Right.
still your kids, so I guess you still, yeah,
Yeah, and they're still nearby. Our son and his girlfriend came over. We watched the Super Bowl just last night. Our one daughter and her Colombian husband that we're over with. We have a granddaughter now. We had the granddaughter. They went skiing, and then our other daughter and her Bangladeshi husband are in Philadelphia, so they got to be down in Philly when the Super Bowl winning was happening. So they sent some nice photos of they live near Center City. So I said, well, go there, but be safe and don't come back in one piece. So yeah, they're close by, and it's wonderful to be able to have kids that close relationship. Yeah, so it's cool. And then I'd say being able to create what was TogetherSoft, a wonderful company. That's when I first learned about remote development. A team in Russia. I used to commute to Russia, but we went from the proverbial, a half a dozen folks in the basement to I don't know 400 people and 50 some $1 million of sales a year, and then we sold it to Portland. So that was living the dream, for sure. And that I still get people going, "Oh, that was awesome! I love that tool." I kind of made a lot of it was pragmatically making features that I wanted to use on my own projects, and and we had just a kick-ass dev team. So that was a beautiful, wonderful experience. I got to live in Russia half time. Um, so in beautiful St. Petersburg. So you're probably familiar with the beautiful Italian Rastrelli architect. Yeah, so that was a splendid achievement to build such a company. And I started moonlighting with them in '95, and we sold it in 2003. But we technically created the company in 2000. So it was like 3 years. It was like 10 years shoved into three, kind of. It was very high stress, a lot of travel. Literally, I spent 2 weeks a month in Russia.
wow. So that's
Yeah,
actually again that comes back to what you said earlier about your partner doing the majority
right.
of the work with your children. If of
Yeah,
course you're spending 1 week out of two in
yeah,
another country, that yeah, that's a lot of time.
it is.
I'd say.
Yeah,
Wow. Thanks for sharing, because indeed there's actually three things that are, yeah, really nice ones that are in completely different kind of parts of your life, but at the same time all intertwined one way or another. So really nice.
yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. Let's move to that next question. Do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. And it's I'll probably give you a few, but I often say, well, one funny slide I use is called "Mind the Gap," which folks in Britain, of course, it's plastered all over the tube, but it's essentially the gap between the platform and the train. But I like to say it's the gap between an agility taking an action and getting feedback. So yeah, you can build an entire product and then show it to somebody and get feedback, but that's a really huge gap in time and it's very expensive. So, if you have to reduce it down to that one thing, that's kind of my go-to.
Mm.
And um, the I have two other slides. One says be humble, even when you know you're right. Uh, but we are so egotistical. We're so sure of ourselves. Of course they want this. Of course this feature has to do that. Of course da 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 da. No, just stop it with all that. And then the companion slide is be lazy, do less, uh, which goes back to the getting the feedback sooner. If you write some giant spec or if you create this huge UX, Figma diagrams, that's just delaying you getting something feedback on something real. So another phrase that I think one of my superpowers is being able to make something small to deliver it and test it. And so, and I have some examples when I talk about it at conferences or whatever in a little more detail. But a phrase that I've come up with that I think helps, because well, what do you mean, John? What Like I have one slide that talks about doing just enough, of the various things, just enough modeling, just enough requirements, just enough design, etc. And then what do you mean by just enough? I don't know. You have to figure that out, right? It's
Mm.
that the whole point is um, you need to think a little more holistically about things, and the trick is to make things uncomfortably smaller than you would like. And the important word is uncomfortable because, oh, we're going to do the MVP. A lot of times I see people and they'll show me what, no, I think I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. And I can still cut it down smaller. Um, and that's the reason I call it a superpower is because I've yet, it just does not seem to be that common. And then people wonder why they miss deadlines, or they wonder why they're spending more, or they wonder why yada, yada, yada. So the real cool thing is, if you have no other means of judging, set a timer is a way I joke about it. But yeah,
Mm.
please stop doing so much. Get something out there, test it, see what it's like. What's the cheapest way to test? All those kinds of things come down to, yeah, mind the gap, shorten that gap, get feedback. Even if, like, the point is, why do we give them more than they need, because we think we would be embarrassed. I'm not afraid of being embarrassed of
Mm.
producing something for the customer and showing them what's obviously not enough. I know it. I'm pretty sure it. But you know what? It takes no effort other than suppressing your ego to double check that. And then meanwhile, we're often might be working on the next thing that's going to come along. But that helps show them, instead of revealing something, it helps bring them along. And you're just showing little bits, little bits, little bits, and getting that confirmation that the next step that we all thought is the next step or not. So
Or that the step you just took is the right one, because
correct. Yeah.
we might be wrong, even if we know inherently this is right, and then we
Has
ask
to
them and
be.
say,
Yeah.
nope.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
It's
Exactly.
yeah, I love the fact that you say about being uncomfortable about it, because it need for me an MVP is, you if I'm not embarrassed about an MVP, it's not an MVP. I
Yeah.
mean, it
That's a
should be minimal, it should be viable, but yeah, it should be um, these days, when, especially when it's companies that have already something, when they add a new feature, their MVP of that new feature is always full blown. It's like, yeah, but we can't deliver smaller. Well, you can. It shouldn't be marketable, whatever, but it should be, give it something to a few customers that can give you some feedback,
yep.
use it internally, whatever. But yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
What basically for me, it's also like, okay, imagine that for whatever reason we have to ship tomorrow. What can we do? What's the one thing we still need to add to ship it tomorrow? And that's the thing that is, and then maybe we will give another day, but that's the MVP.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what is so hard for so many people.
Yep.
And how did you learn that? You know what triggered you to go always smaller and smaller?
Oh, great question. Um, hmm. Yeah, no, I can't think of anything specific. Um, yeah, wow. If I come up with something, I'll let you know. Yeah, I think it's just over time. Um,
Mhm.
the,
Yeah,
the,
that's the thing. Sometimes we learn new tricks and we don't even know where we learned it. It seems that it's been always there, but yeah.
yeah,
And maybe it was, huh? Maybe it was already when you're young that you were already doing things in very small bits. But
yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably a progression of um, just trying to do small things, balsamic sketches instead of full. So I think it was probably a little bit of a reaction to heavier weight processes than, kind of what can I cut out? How can I do something faster? And I often attribute uh, like my object-oriented architecture skills are because I couldn't afford a D-size plotter. So I couldn't make big, ugly, giant diagrams. I had to turn things into something that would fit on an A4 or a normal single sheet of paper on my cheap printer at home, right? So I got very good at separating architectural concepts. I often joke it was because I didn't have a big budget. I couldn't be sloppy. I couldn't be huge. So I don't I sometimes I think it's a little bit of that, even just uh, having to do with less and realizing it still worked and maybe even better, versus having a full-time plotter and a full-time UX person, who knows. But
hmm.
yeah, that is a fascinating question,
But
Brian.
sometimes it's indeed this, that the fact that we have limitations and we basically you use that limitation of your printer as an advantage and yeah, it might have originally been an excuse, but you learn something out of that.
Yeah,
And maybe if you would have had, if somebody that said, oh, to you, like, oh, but then I'll buy you a bigger printer or whatever, maybe that would have worked badly at that time because
yeah,
the smaller bits were actually what was more interesting. Um, yeah,
yeah.
that's a nice way to look at that. Let's move to that next question. What have you learned about remote work? And you already talked that you, with TogetherSoft, that you were working remotely, which is in the early 2000s, I think, if I'm
Yeah, late
remember
90s.
correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So yeah, there was not many tools available at that time.
now,
Um,
yeah, I'm trying to remember what the issue tracker was. I don't remember. Yeah, well, like, yeah, but yeah. I've been doing it for a long time, and then yeah, with TogetherSoft, our actual office was in Raleigh, North Carolina, so I would go there once in a while. Um, and then, like I said, commute to Russia, commute, um, and and then even after that, start. Yeah, it was still remote, working for other companies, and then there's some other startups. And it's a hard discipline, but I was already, I had essentially had the first half of my career as an engineer, in an office with a tie and a briefcase and that whole thing, and working face to face with people. So I kind of had the career that helped shape me as a person that's used to working, in an office with people and collaborating, which I love. um, and then working remotely without such awesome tools like Zoom and whatnot, so I did that for a long time. But I think even the TogetherSoft experience shows that I went there every month. We broke bread and drank vodka and coded and did stuff at least together 2 weeks out of the month. And then after that we could do stuff remotely. So even that was an important lesson. And more recently, realizing that having that opportunity to break bread and go out to the bar or dinner or whatever, um, with people you're working with is so important that it it gives grace if you slip up later, if you say something accidental. Oh, well, we've we drank some beers together. He's a good guy. You just look, yeah, he didn't mean that, or there's I wonder how harder that is to build when you never see each other in real life.
Hmm.
And then I also wonder, I don't know, it might be for no reason at all, but the younger folks who start a career and only ever know that. I don't know. Luckily the whole world isn't remote. There's still plenty of people that actually go to a real job in a real office with real people next to them, because I think there's something about that. We call that work, and it's not home. So I don't think I've learned any amazing things recently. Just maybe a little more um, concerned about what is the impact to generation that's not yours or not mine. What's that like for
Yeah,
people?
I still I give sometimes the example when I first worked at an office. I learned so much tricks about how office works. Like, okay, you can go first of all, go drink coffee and have a chat with your colleagues. That's important. But
Mm-hmm.
that was and then in another company that was so much bigger, you can actually go drink coffee at another floor, and there's people from that other team with who you work together, and that way you can connect and learn about them, not just through email or to the meetings that we
Right.
have together, but just in by walking up to that other floor or down,
Yeah.
depending on where they were. And that's something that I've learned by doing it, because
Mm-hmm.
somebody told me, like, hey, come, let's get a coffee at the next floor. Like, why would we go? There is coffee next. No, no, but there the other team is, and then we can talk to them. Like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Because what we do is, I mean, I jokingly say software would be easy if it weren't for all the people. Um, but in
yes.
reality, it's a very social
Mm.
activity. At least it should be. And yeah, and it's a lot harder. I mean, now I'm consulting with a team that just started recently, and they have a devs in Poland, and then we have a bunch of folks in the Americas, because some are even in Central America. I think one might even, yeah, there's one in South America. I don't know. It's kind of in our time zone over here, my time zone. But yeah, I don't know how often or if ever they've gotten. I bet they've never all gotten together. So yeah, it's kind of a, yeah. I agree with you. There's something special about being able to just sit and chat and not have to schedule it, per se. Yeah.
Oh, that's the other thing, indeed, that when we work remotely, like every time you want to chat with someone, it has to be in a meeting, and then by definition, it takes, I don't know, half an hour or an hour instead of maybe just 5 minutes. Then
Right.
somebody's walking by, and then all of a sudden our agendas are full, and when's the time to code anymore? Because we
Right.
have to have all these meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird. So anyway, yeah, we'll see. I think hopefully it'll flush itself out. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're going back and forth. I see a lot of advantage of working remote, but we have to learn a lot of new skills again,
Hmm.
or at least relearn some things. And definitely, like you say, meeting people, there is nothing that beats them in
Yep.
every remote team or hybrid team. The the more you can see people from time to time, the better. um, which, depending on time zones and depending on how far they are, it might be a little bit harder, but it always pays off if we do it.
Yeah, if I had my way, I would sort of create the reasons to meet in person at least once, and then maybe once a year. I don't know. I get it. It's expensive. But somehow get a connection going, and then you can go back to being remote. And, I think that would go a long way, but yeah.
But I do think it sometimes is possible to create connections, just like we have a conversation here, and we take the time to have a good connection.
True.
But most of the time we don't do that in the office. Like, oh, no, no, no. It's like 5 minute meeting here or that. It's like, no, no, no. Okay, but who are you? What can you talk a little bit about you as a person? And of course, it's so much easier when we get together and have a drink or have a meal together, and you can talk about, I don't know, if you have a bad day or whatever. That's also a part of getting to know each other a little bit better.
Yep, I agree.
So that really helps. Okay, let's move to that next question. What's a book that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think Michael Hammond's Evolve Agility,
And I
and
think that's the book.
and his recent he does workshops on it with Lisa Adkins, and sometimes just him. Um, and it's his workshops are I would say a little more advanced thinking than some of the stuff in his book. So because it's from 2018, so he's evolved. Funny enough, evolve agility, but it coalesces a lot of things that I know over the past 5 years. My colleague Jon Turley was um, exposing me to. So there's a lot of cool things blended in there, and uh, things around how people make their meaning, ways to get teams, um, let's say to be able to accelerate, and it's called like creating a deliberately developmental environment, being able to have some ways, we might call it psychological safety, but sort of a social container in which to sustain things that might get a little heated, for example, and then ways and different practices. So it's a really fascinating approach to trying to become, I think, help teams become more high performing. So yeah, and he's, we spent a good amount of time together, and fascinating, super smart, super skillful to watch kind of him run workshops and see how he works is very insightful, and things that he can help you learn how to do. So it's super powerful stuff for as I said, even though I joke about the people side of things, that what is the first value? Oh yeah, people. Which is the hardest part, frankly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I know I have the book somewhere there. I don't know it by, but unfortunately, with with the podcast, I learn every week at least one more book, and then it's hard to get. But
Yeah.
it's exactly, and it's a book that I've heard many people really positive about it. So it's somewhere there, but I haven't really started, or maybe I even started it once and then got carried away with something else. So I definitely haven't finished that book. So it's but maybe indeed, if they're workshop, maybe that might be a good way to learn something. And if I remember correctly, I think at some point you were thinking about another book as well.
Could have been. You might have to remind me if I said it and it's something else.
I think you talked about this book at some
Oh,
point.
from Ron, yeah, because that's as close to kind of how I view practicing. I remember whenever he wrote it, he sent me a manuscript to review, to give him, speaking of mind the gap, right, to give him some early feedback. I was like, oh yeah, I love this. It's kind of like, this is the way I think of software. So yeah, I mean, it's I think a good introduction for folks who might wonder, about software. So I think there's um, a need for simplification. I often say
Mhm.
speaking of those big diagrams, that I'd walk past, cubicles, I see these giant diagrams, and anybody can create a complicated system. That's child's play, right? It's nothing to be proud of when you see all these boxes and it's like, oh,
Mm.
yeah. It's the old,
It's
here you go, Eves. I wish I could have made this shorter, but I didn't have time. Right? It's like,
exactly, yeah. That's the thing, and I sometimes have the feeling the same thing about. I don't know how you feel about that, but sometimes have the same feeling about some of the books I'm reading, with people, the consultants writing a book using very difficult words. I'm like, yeah, you make me work harder as a reader. I prefer it if you have to work harder as a writer, so that I can. It's easier for me to understand. And
yeah.
sometimes I do it. I think some of them do it on purpose because they want to look smart and whatever. But it's like, yeah, sorry, but I think as a reader, I would love that you would have worked harder to make it easier for me to
Yeah,
understand.
that's a little bit, every once in a while, I think I found myself saying that in some code reviews, like, this part's a little too clever. Come on. Yeah, just, I get it. You know, it might have been hard to write. I don't know what, but it's the ratio of reading versus writing. You're only writing it once, but there's a lot of reading that's going to happen. Make it so it's, because I ended up with one of the flight simulation programs for the F-14. I I rewrote it, and I had to learn weird stuff like hex because we ran it. It was Fortran, and we ran it on a cyber supercomputer, like a CDC 170 or something like that. Um, and yeah, it was like some amazing, clever. It was a 60-bit machine, not 64, not 32, 60-bit. And there were some amazing, crazy, probably optimizations that were unnecessary. But somebody who knew too much did some bit twiddling in the middle of it. Was like,
Hmm.
what is this? So I had to put it in aeronautical speak, and make it exactly what you said. Please make it easier so I can read it. So I can read it. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Well, and
crazy stuff.
with the excuse that in the older days we had very limited memory, and everything needed to be smaller and smaller. So I can, at the same time, I can understand a bit, but
Right.
that's no longer the case. I
Right.
think.
Yeah.
Well, we do have a rocket out in space for 30 years that is running on, what is it, an 80 or a 286, whatever. That's a lot less than what we have on our phones these days.
Oh, or on our
And
wrists. Yeah.
or on our wrists, indeed.
Yeah.
Even that's like, yeah, it's insane if you think about that, then that the code had to be that kind of small. But these days, yeah, code is, and sometimes code becomes too bloated, so that's the other problem, of
Yep.
course. um, but at least make it, well, we're writing only partially for your computer. You're also writing for the people who are coming after you, maintaining the software, if it's you in an older version of you, or if it's someone else. We're going to, like you said earlier, I want to stress that we were going to read this code much more than just writing it. And that's so
Absolutely.
important. That's really is really crucial,
Hmm.
for people to think about that. And I just today I gave a workshop at a school with last year students, and yeah, I really talked about, okay, when you work as a student, you have to realize that, yeah, dare to ask these stupid questions, dare to ask it, because sometimes you don't always realize that you still need to learn. Of course, the moment that you finish your degree, you think you know everything, but actually in reality we don't know much, and we
No.
still have a lot to learn. And at that point, I think, to come back to what you said earlier, that ego might be very big as a new student coming into work, thinking, I've learned so much new things. um, and then we write all these clever code that actually makes it a lot harder to read it. So yeah.
Excuse me.
No problem, no problem. Okay, let's move to, for me, one of the most interesting questions, especially again after conversations in this kind of direction, all kind of directions. So, what's the question that you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
Yeah, this might be a tough one, but the one that I thought about is ask me about experts. So,
So, what
all right,
about experts?
thanks. Oh, funny you should ask. Um, yeah, so there's this part of the meaning making uh, concept, and it comes from, I don't know, Bill Torbert, and so there's a lot of decades of research behind this, and it's just, of course, a you know uh, an attempt to explain the way humans operate, so to speak. So you can go from yeah, an opportunist, and these words don't explain all of they're called action logics, but you can imagine the kids are often opportunistic. Hey, you want to get the candy or something. And then diplomats, the ones who are always trying to keep the peace, try to make sure there's no really strong voices and things like that. And then so opportunists are very inward focused, diplomats are outward, experts are inward, achievers are outward, individual. Anyway, there's this bit of a different ways that people make their meaning, and actually, at different times we might use different things. An expert approach might be okay, like, oh, the Titanic's sinking, get in that lifeboat. Okay, like I'll do command and control all day long. I don't need to be autonomous. I'm happy to follow orders. Um, but I often fear, well, I don't fear, but the expert class, might make their meaning around their expertise, and sure, there's value in that. I'm not saying there's not, but uh, I also sort of think of the potential, like the curse of the expert, and probably because it's fights with my drop your ego type thing and be humble. You don't know as much as you think you are, and also with the multiple perspectives and being able to stand above that and realize there might be multiple perspectives. So I think we often fall into the trap of the experts, and um, trust the science, trust the experts, trust the this, trust the well, maybe not. They're not always right. They're not, so same thing with how that then invades our project management space and Taylorism, and well, no, it's a time study and Taylorism. Hey, Taylor was, I think we're still living the nightmare, at least for software. It's certainly good for a factory and things like that. Maybe, there's applications for it. But as far as in that invading into the software space, I think we're still so far. I don't know. I don't know the right words, but it feels like a constant setback when people think what we do in software is like a machine. It's knowable. Yes, some aspects of what we do are. I often talk about when you have big fuzzy ideas, the expert class and those who think we can turn it into knowable stuff, or who can put it into units of work. um, there's a high likelihood you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You're throwing out the opportunity to live with that fuzziness, live with that unknowable part, which where you could get innovation and creativity. But no, we got to estimate a year's worth of work, and like so I even see companies now that still do that kind of mentality. I'm thinking, this is something I fought decades ago. How is this still a thing? Like what? And I think it's
And
because
it seemed it became stronger the last couple of years. At least that's the feeling I have. I don't know
yeah,
how you feel about it.
right, yeah, it could be. Yeah. So anyway, it's not, and it's not fair to blame it on the experts, but I think it's that mentality of um, thinking we know more than we do, treating things as if they're the I struggle because some of us can see that there are unknowables and that's okay, and others can't, right? So it's a weird thing. But anyway, that's a fun area to talk through and realize and sort of pick apart in terms of what now I'm going to bet now that I've mentioned that and other people that'll listen to it, you can spot it once you sort of hear it. You can realize, oh yeah, because what happens when we miss our estimate? Well, I guess we just need to estimate harder, right? I mean, it's
Right.
it's I guess we didn't have enough expertise. No, it's just an impossible thing. Part of what you're doing is unknowable, and you'll never estimate enough. Like, you just need to start doing, and you need to. Earlier, you made a good phrase of taking small steps. You get feedback sooner, and are we going even in the right direction? And oftentimes, I'll say when it's so fuzzy, you're not sure. Just take a step. I mean, not one over a cliff, but
Preferable not, yeah.
yeah, right. But we it's another superpower is being comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it's okay. We're gonna work at this. We're gonna do things and take pieces off that we do figure out and get those into the system. But it's okay to leave parts of it still maybe fuzzy, but easier said than done. I think I value my aeronautical engineering discipline because it taught me there is no free lunch. You can't just carry more and not affect the rest of the parameters of the aircraft, right? Okay, well, we won't go as far. Well, no, I need to go far too. Well, then you need to carry less or can't go as fast, or right. I mean, so in some sense, in aeronautical design, you're always negotiating scope, so to speak, and that I think that
Because you're limited by the context
correct,
that is defined by nature in a sense, because you
right,
know that with that kind of thing. Okay,
correct,
so that's
yeah, yeah, and so it's
and
you're always trying to look for the sweet spot, just the balance of the parameters you care about, and do your best. And I think that has served me well at realizing that sometimes you just need to maybe probe a little bit and get some feedback, and our bodies are another thing that we're really good at as humans is sensing. So
hmm,
instead of a predict and plan type thing, sense and respond. So anyway, experts love predicting and planning, and when it doesn't work, they try to do more. Sense and responders realize, we'll predict and plan what we can, but the rest we need to just be better at sensing and responding. So anyway, that's
and because by now you're with all your expertise, a lot of people might call you an expert in agile or in like you said earlier on, in making things smaller. How do you avoid that you get trapped into this? First for yourself, but also because I can imagine that clients expect you as an expert to solve their problems in a way.
another, yeah, very astute of you. That's actually something that John Turley helped me realize. He goes, look, you know, there's a place and time for your humility. And then sometimes there's a place and time for you to just tell them what to do. And, not maybe quite that bluntly, but sometimes. So, a client that I've worked with that, really needs a lot of help. Um, I am a little more blunt or a little more like, look, I'm sorry, but there's not a there's not a new product development that I would ever start that did not have BDD going on and automated testing, and there's some certain things that are just non-negotiable, and we need to get this in. So I have learned to be a little more assertive, and in some sense that appeals to the experts in the room. And you're right, they look other experts will respect the bigger experts, so to speak. But in general, I try to um, help guide and suggest, and not just come in, and make proclamations, because um, part of it is it's more powerful when there's a bit of a consensus of everyone starts. Matter of fact, it's kind of how we work. Is we workshop some ways in that we build a consensus of what's going on, and not just like I don't like. All right, I'm going to come in and do an agile assessment, and with my clipboard in hand and my white lab coat, and I'm going to grade you. Oh, fail on this, fail on that.
Like we had in the Taylor sense, we're like,
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Timers and how long does it take you to get something out? How much? What's the reverse flow? So the point is, we might have the team have a bit of an opportunity to have a cathartic release to say, okay, we didn't call you in here, John, because everything's awesome. We know, so it's part of getting everybody on board, and then depending on, oftentimes teams know ways to do better. They're just somehow constraints, like you said. Sometimes there's outer forces that cause dopey behavior, and we have to try to figure that out. But other times, like John Turley says, give them really strong hints of what needs to happen, and then we'll go from there. So I try to walk that line finely, because I don't, I just have a lot of experience. Yeah, you're right that some people might say you're an expert. I don't like referring to myself as that. I just have a lot of experience, and I've done a lot, literally. I mean, blessed a career in terms of the amazing, crazy things I've done in my life.
and all the mistakes you made help
Yes.
you become the experts you are now, in a way.
That's true. That's very true. And the mentors I've had along the way, the people that, I like one manager always tripled my estimates. So guess what, Eves? I don't do estimates unless I have to. And there's another story,
But that's indeed I really like that you talk about your mentors, because I've seen, well, a lot of people. I have coaches, mentors, whatever I call them, for more than 20 years, different kind of people, sometimes two at the same time, sometimes just one every x months. But yeah, I'm back to seeing someone every 2 weeks again, because I've noticed that it helps me. And I think it's so important that people realize that is part of what us helps us, because like you said earlier on, you don't always see what you need to see,
Right.
and having someone asking you difficult questions, at least it helps me to see this. And I think that is really important, that we keep mentioning that okay, you were learned a lot of things, but there was also people that helped you see things along the way.
Exactly. Yep.
That's really is important as well. Okay, we're already at that very last question. Who do you think I should ask next? And I think you dropped the name already multiple times.
Yeah, I think, I would say, my, he's not adaptive the same. We're my colleague. We're still working together. John Turley.
And
Been
I think
literally,
that's this
yep,
picture.
yep. Yeah, and yeah. Speaking of somebody that can coach, so to speak, individuals, yeah, he's amazing, and we pretty much spoke almost every day of the week. We would have a the daily show, as we called it, um, for 5.5 years, and built various services, tested things, value propositions, and went out and probed and tested things and delivered things, and internally and externally, um, and really amazing, like dynamic duo, because the Venn diagram is pretty cool, and he's taught me. I would often couch it as the secret sauce to what I do. Like, oh yeah, that sounds right, John. Like he could pull, somehow get me to think about things differently, and help, crazy stuff that he happily talk to you about, around focusing, and and all the things that in like the Michael Hammond book, he's read a lot of the original works, Because he was looking for. I mean, I'm sure he'll explain it to you. Like, there's got to be better ways to do this stuff. He was a PM, project manager, that kind of thing. So he started he started getting discouraged with like, there's got to be a better way to for this work stuff because this can be soul destroying in some of these companies.
Hmm.
So
I think.
yeah, I think he will bring a completely different perspective of what I think are some of the most important things we need to do with teams. Uh, help with burnout, help with people realizing other perspectives, how to care about your feelings in a way that's not often talked about at the workplace, but we have them and it's so important. How do you use them in our workplace
Mm.
because the
Yeah, somehow companies think you have to leave the
right,
emotions out, but that's, yeah, I'm a whole person. Like, if I
yeah,
have to drop that part, then there is not much left. I mean, there is, yeah.
yeah,
Then it will come out in a different way. It will
hmm
be come out in a less healthy way if I am able to say. I had moments that I was really mad because, I don't know, something happened on the way to work, or I had maybe an argument with my partner before I left home. And if I just come at work and I say, well, sorry, I'm in a bad mood because I said some stupid things to my partner, that's off my chest. And then people know, okay, we have to leave Eve alone for half an hour. And yeah, that just helps. If otherwise they come to me and I might be grumpy and they might think, oh, what did I do? And it actually has nothing to
yeah,
do with you. It's just my bad
and then
day.
even at work, like listen because sometimes you might be in a meeting and somebody says something and suddenly you feel you're getting red or you're getting warm or
Mm.
your heart rate's going up and so stuff like that is real. And sometimes it's about architecture. It can be about lots of things. And the it, like it could be as I mentioned, even if we're really not sure exactly which way to go for this idea, take a step and then feel it. You'll know, like, ooh, that feels pretty good. Let's keep going. Or, oh no, this doesn't feel like we're not doing the right thing. So it's kind of for both. It can be for realizing that we're whole humans, and also for taking advantage of. It's a huge, like it's a huge, sensing system that we have, and we often just try to fight it
Ignore it.
or it. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
exactly. Fight it or ignore it, and
yeah,
yeah, I love the example you give because I immediately got a flashback to a moment at work where somebody said something, and it immediately felt like, hey, we should deal with that, and we didn't in that moment for all kind of reasons which were wrong. And then it, yeah, that actually hindered the rest of the meeting, and that really gave so much trouble. And it was only in retrospect when I looked back a couple of weeks later that I realized, like, that was the moment that we should have addressed it, and then we wouldn't have had all the other problems.
yeah, and you and
And
and you felt it, right?
I
Right.
felt it, like,
Yeah,
immediately. I felt
yeah.
like, "Ugh,"
Boom. Yeah, yeah,
and yeah, I didn't react to that, and then I overreacted to something else that had nothing to do with that other part, but just with the original part. And
yeah.
it took me a while to realize that, and some coaching conversations to realize, like, oh, that's the moment that actually that triggered a lot of
Right.
the other things. And
Yeah.
that's
So he's really good with that, and can help individuals and teams. Um, because
really
I
wonderful.
yeah. So at any rate, yeah, I
And
appreciate that.
there was another friend of mine, Charles-Louis de Mare. I had already invited him because, yeah, so I already heard some really great stories. So I'm looking forward to have him on the show as well.
Cool.
Well, John, it was really wonderful time that we've spent together. If people want to connect to you, what would be a good way to connect with you?
Well, certainly, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. A lot of people hit me
And
up there, and
that should be the link, if I'm
yep,
correct, just your
yep,
name.
yeah. And you already showed my picture, so it'll be that. And yeah, I mean, I have a technical debt blog. Technical
And
debt.
that should be the
Yeah,
link which is
Yeah, and
really interesting.
yeah, and it's a
Uh,
little dated. Maybe I should start updating it one of these days. But
I was about to say, I don't remember it anymore, but I know in preparation I looked it up and said, okay, maybe there is some more there, but definitely I remember reading it, yeah, in the
yeah,
past, and that was like, yeah, because technical depth is everywhere. It's
it is.
and the more we learn about it, I think it's really good to learn
Yeah,
dealing
and
with that.
what's funny is I since learned that actually Ward Cunningham coined that,
True.
and somehow, well, I mean, it makes sense, but yeah, somehow I latched onto it, and then he never asked for the domain. I would have given it to him, but yeah, it's like after the fact I learned. I didn't know we, of course, we spent time in Snowbird
and
together.
and 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 sometimes people, yeah, we learn about the technique, or we learn about something, and we keep, maybe you were more attached to dealing with that than he was at that time, and that's why you cared about the domain more than he. I don't know.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So yeah, people can reach out. I'm very accessible. You'd be shocked at people ask for things and I say yes. So uh, yeah,
Well,
I'm
and
not.
that's also how we got connected in the
Yeah,
past
and
as
I
well.
appreciate
So
that, Eve. Yeah, like for me, it's I'm happy to give back, and share. Love talking about this stuff. So um,
well,
uh,
yeah, I think we're all standing on the shoulder of giants, and it's really nice if we can give back to other people. Just like you talked in the beginning about the mentors that helped you when you were young, they didn't maybe even think about it, that because then that was just part of who they were. Just
yeah,
like you give back to other people, but that's how we learn and grow as a species or as a community,
yeah.
in many different ways. So in that way, I'm again very grateful for your time. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Eve. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.